It began as a quiet update buried deep within official palace briefings, one that aides hoped would pass unnoticed. But when senior royal staff suddenly altered schedules, canceled appearances, and tightened communications around King Charles, the whispers became impossible to ignore. Something had changed in his recovery battle. What was once described as steady progress was now being discussed in far more cautious terms, and the palace could no longer keep the concern behind closed doors. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For months, the public had been encouraged to believe that King Charles was steadily moving forward. Official statements carried a tone of confidence. Royal engagements continued, appearances were carefully managed, and every update seemed designed to reassure a nation that its monarch remained firmly in control of both his duties and his recovery. There was a sense that the worst had passed. Supporters of the king took comfort in every appearance, every message, and every sign that he was determined to carry on despite the enormous challenge he faced. Yet behind those carefully measured reassurances, a different story was reportedly beginning to unfold. According to growing reports from royal insiders, several engagements that had once seemed routine were suddenly being subjected to intense review. Meetings were quietly adjusted. Travel plans were reconsidered. Commitments that had been expected to move forward without issue were reportedly being examined with a level of caution that had not existed before. None of this was visible to the public at first. In fact, that was precisely the point. The palace has always understood that stability is one of the monarchy's greatest strengths, and projecting calm during uncertain times has long been considered essential. But even the most carefully guarded institutions struggle to contain concern when enough people begin noticing the same pattern. Then came the private meetings. Senior aides were reportedly gathering more frequently behind closed doors. Discussions that had once focused on routine scheduling allegedly began shifting toward larger questions about responsibilities, planning, and the future. Family members were said to be receiving increasingly regular updates regarding the king's condition. While no one publicly suggested a crisis was unfolding, the frequency of these conversations raised eyebrows among those accustomed to the palace's normal rhythm. Something had clearly changed, and those closest to the situation appeared to understand it long before the public did. What made the situation even more unsettling was the contrast between public confidence and private concern. To the outside world, the monarchy appeared steady, yet insiders reportedly sensed growing anxiety beneath the surface. Small details that once seemed insignificant began attracting attention. Decisions that might otherwise have gone unnoticed suddenly carried new meaning. And as speculation quietly spread through royal circles, questions emerged that nobody wanted to ask aloud. Had the recovery become more complicated than previously believed? Was there information the public had not yet been told, and if so, how serious was it? Those questions exploded into the spotlight when the palace finally confirmed a development significant enough to alter the entire conversation surrounding the king's recovery. The reassuring narrative that had dominated headlines suddenly gave way to uncertainty, concern, and renewed scrutiny. What had been framed as a story of steady progress now appeared far more complex, forcing royal observers to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the king's condition and what it might mean for the future of the crown. But the palace announcement was only the beginning, because the real story started months earlier when subtle warning signs first appeared around the king's increasingly demanding schedule. Long before the latest announcement shocked royal watchers, there were small moments that seemed insignificant on their own. A shortened appearance here, a postponed engagement there. Yet when viewed together, they formed a pattern that few could ignore. Looking back now, many royal observers believe the signs had been there all along. Not dramatic signs, not headline-making revelations. Instead, they appeared as small adjustments scattered across months of royal activity, subtle enough to avoid immediate alarm, yet persistent enough to leave a lingering sense that something was not quite right. At the time, most people dismissed them as understandable consequences of a monarch undergoing treatment while continuing to shoulder the immense responsibilities of the crown. After all, King Charles had repeatedly demonstrated his determination to keep working. He remained committed to public service, continued attending important engagements, and projected the same sense of duty that had defined much of his life. That commitment earned widespread admiration, but it may also have concealed a more complicated reality. As the months progressed, royal schedules began telling a story that official statements never directly addressed. Appearances that were expected to last longer sometimes concluded earlier than anticipated. Certain commitments were quietly adjusted. Travel arrangements appeared increasingly tailored around health considerations rather than tradition. None of these decisions seemed alarming in isolation. In fact, palace officials consistently emphasized that such adjustments were entirely reasonable and reflected a responsible approach to balancing recovery with royal obligations. Yet the frequency of these changes gradually attracted attention from those who closely follow the monarchy. What made the situation particularly intriguing was the remarkable effort being made to preserve a sense of normality. Every public appearance carried an unmistakable message of resilience. The king continued meeting dignitaries, fulfilling constitutional duties, and engaging with causes that had long been important to him. To supporters, these moments were evidence of strength. They saw a monarch refusing to allow personal challenges to define his reign. But others viewed the same events through a different lens. They wondered whether the determination to maintain business as usual was placing an enormous burden on someone already fighting a demanding health battle. Behind the scenes, palace staff reportedly faced an increasingly delicate balancing act. Their challenge was not simply managing a royal schedule. It was finding a way to protect the king's recovery while also preserving public confidence in the institution he represented. That responsibility grew heavier with each passing week. Every adjustment required careful consideration. Every engagement demanded evaluation. Every decision carried consequences that extended far beyond a single appearance. The monarchy thrives on continuity, yet continuity becomes far more difficult when uncertainty begins creeping into daily operations. As speculation quietly intensified, royal commentators started connecting dots that previously seemed unrelated. Questions emerged about whether the pressure of maintaining stability was masking deeper concerns. Supporters pointed to Charles's unwavering dedication as proof that he remained firmly on course. Critics and analysts, however, increasingly wondered if the visible determination was coming at a hidden cost. The contrast became impossible to ignore. On one side stood a king committed to fulfilling his duties. On the other stood the undeniable reality that recovery is rarely a straight path. The more observers looked back, the more those seemingly minor adjustments appeared less like isolated decisions and more like pieces of a larger puzzle. What had once been dismissed as routine scheduling changes now carried a different significance. They hinted at challenges that may have been unfolding quietly behind palace walls long before the public became aware of them. And as those questions grew louder, attention gradually shifted away from the king himself and toward those closest to him, the family members who were witnessing these developments firsthand and who understood better than anyone what might be at stake. As those warning signs accumulated, attention turned toward the people closest to the king. Family members who suddenly found themselves preparing for possibilities they hoped would never arrive. Behind palace gates, the recovery battle was never just about one man. It was about a family trying to balance hope, duty, and uncertainty while the eyes of the world remained fixed upon them. As questions surrounding King Charles's recovery continued to grow, the focus gradually expanded beyond the monarch himself. What had started as concern about one man's health was becoming something much larger, a test of resilience for an entire family carrying the weight of one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. Every update about the king created new questions, not only about his condition but also about how those closest to him were managing the immense pressure unfolding behind the scenes. While official statements remained measured and reassuring, reports increasingly suggested that the emotional burden on senior members of the royal family was becoming impossible to ignore. Among those facing growing responsibility was Prince William. As heir to the throne, he had always occupied a unique position within the monarchy, but the circumstances surrounding his father's recovery reportedly accelerated conversations that might otherwise have remained years in the future. More observers began noticing William taking on increasingly significant responsibilities. Some viewed this as a natural evolution of his role. Others saw it as evidence that the family was quietly preparing for possibilities nobody wanted to discuss publicly. Regardless of the reason, the expectations surrounding him appeared to grow heavier with each passing month. Every decision carried additional significance. Every appearance attracted greater scrutiny. The future seemed closer than ever, even as everyone hoped it would remain far away. At the same time, Princess Catherine reportedly emerged as one of the family's most important sources of stability. During periods of uncertainty, Institutions often depend upon individuals capable of projecting calm, even when challenges are mounting beneath the surface. Royal commentators frequently pointed to Catherine's steady presence as a reassuring force during a difficult chapter. While speculation swirled endlessly around the monarchy, she appeared focused on preserving a sense of continuity for both the family and the public. In moments when uncertainty threatened to dominate the narrative, that quiet consistency became increasingly valuable. Queen Camilla also remained at the center of the king's support system. Through months of treatment, recovery, and mounting public attention, she reportedly continued balancing her own responsibilities while standing beside Charles during one of the most demanding periods of his reign. Yet even the strongest support networks can feel the strain of prolonged uncertainty. The challenge facing the family was not simply maintaining appearances. It was finding a way to navigate fear, responsibility, and hope simultaneously. That challenge affected everyone differently. What made the situation particularly difficult was the contrast between private emotions and public expectations. Millions looked to the royal family as a symbol of stability. Yet behind that expectation were individuals confronting the same worries that any family would face during a serious health battle. The difference was that their concerns unfolded beneath an unrelenting spotlight. Every appearance was analyzed. Every absence generated speculation. Every statement was dissected for hidden meaning. Maintaining unity under those circumstances required extraordinary discipline. As the months passed, discussions reportedly became increasingly focused on continuity and preparedness. Not because anyone had abandoned hope, but because responsible institutions must prepare for uncertainty even while praying for the best outcome. The monarchy's greatest challenge was preserving confidence without appearing indifferent to the seriousness of the situation. It was a delicate balance, one that demanded careful coordination from every senior royal involved. And while the family worked tirelessly to support the king and protect the institution he served, another process was quietly unfolding in parallel, hidden far from public view, and driven by realities that could not be ignored forever. Yet while the family focused on supporting the king, palace officials were confronting a different reality, one that required contingency planning behind closed doors. Palaces are built to project stability, but they are also designed to prepare for every possible outcome. And according to growing reports, preparations were quietly accelerating long before the public knew why. As concerns surrounding King Charles's recovery continued to linger beneath the surface, another story was unfolding far away from public view. While headlines focused on appearances, engagements, and official statements, senior palace aides were reportedly confronting a far more complicated challenge. Their responsibility was not simply to manage the present. It was to prepare for every possibility the future might bring. In an institution that has survived wars, abdications, scandals, and national crises, planning for uncertainty is not considered pessimism. It is considered necessity. And according to growing reports from royal insiders, that planning had become increasingly intense as questions surrounding the king's recovery quietly evolved. What made these preparations particularly significant was how carefully they were concealed from public attention. The palace understood that confidence in the monarchy depends heavily upon continuity. Any suggestion of instability could fuel speculation and create unnecessary anxiety. As a result, every adjustment reportedly took place with extraordinary discretion. Future schedules were reviewed with increasing detail. Commitments months ahead were examined through multiple lenses. Contingency options were reportedly developed for circumstances that officials hoped would never become necessary. On the surface, little appeared unusual. Beneath that surface, however, preparations were becoming increasingly comprehensive. At the heart of these efforts was a simple but profound objective: ensuring that the institution continued functioning smoothly, regardless of what challenges emerged. Royal responsibilities do not pause during periods of uncertainty. Constitutional duties continue. Public expectations remain. National events move forward. The crown must remain steady even when the individuals carrying its burdens face personal struggles. That reality reportedly prompted palace officials to begin gradually redistributing responsibilities where appropriate. Certain duties were reviewed. Additional roles were quietly delegated. Senior members of the family found themselves carrying greater workloads, not because of any public declaration, but because circumstances increasingly demanded it. Communication became another crucial battlefield. Palace staff reportedly understood that information itself could become a source of instability if not managed carefully. Every statement required precision. Every update needed balance. Too much optimism could appear misleading if circumstances changed. Too much caution could trigger panic and endless speculation. Navigating that narrow path became one of the most delicate challenges facing officials behind closed doors. The goal was never to conceal reality, but to ensure that public confidence remained grounded in stability rather than fear. Meanwhile, speculation continued growing beyond palace walls. Commentators analyzed schedules. Observers scrutinized appearances. Every change became a potential clue. Yet despite the mounting attention, official messaging remained remarkably disciplined. The institution projected calm. The narrative emphasized resilience, continuity, and determination. In many ways, it was a remarkable achievement. Even as preparations reportedly intensified behind the scenes, the public image of stability largely remained intact. But maintaining that balance came at a cost. Every decision carried enormous weight. Every adjustment reflected the understanding that the monarchy was navigating one of its most sensitive periods in recent memory. Officials were not merely managing events, they were safeguarding confidence in an institution whose strength has always rested on its ability to endure uncertainty without appearing overwhelmed by it. The challenge was relentless, and the stakes could not have been higher. Then, after months of careful planning, measured messaging, and growing whispers behind palace walls, the moment arrived that changed the entire conversation. The preparations that had seemed invisible suddenly made sense. The questions that had lingered in the background moved directly into the spotlight. What had once been speculation became something far more real, forcing supporters, observers, and critics alike to confront a truth they had hoped might never arrive. Then came the update that changed everything, a statement that transformed months of speculation into a deeply emotional reality. When the palace finally confirmed the latest development in Charles's recovery battle, the reaction was immediate. Across Britain and beyond, millions searched for answers, trying to understand what the announcement truly meant. For months, uncertainty had existed in the background like a distant storm cloud, visible enough to attract concern but never close enough to trigger widespread alarm. That changed the moment the palace released its latest statement. Suddenly, the careful balance that officials had worked so hard to maintain shifted dramatically. What had once been discussed in cautious whispers was now being examined in public view. The announcement did not simply update the public on the king's recovery. It transformed the entire conversation surrounding his health, his future responsibilities, and the future of the monarchy itself. The response was swift and deeply emotional. Across Britain, supporters of the king expressed concern, sympathy, and renewed admiration for the determination he had shown throughout his recovery journey. Many reflected on the immense burden he had carried, while continuing to fulfill the duties expected of a reigning monarch. Others focused on the human side of the story. Beyond the titles, ceremonies, and traditions stood a man facing an extraordinarily difficult challenge while trying to serve his country. That reality resonated with people in a powerful way. Suddenly, discussions that had once centered on royal schedules and official engagements became far more personal. At the same time, media organizations moved quickly to analyze every detail contained within the palace announcement. Commentators examined individual phrases. Analysts debated the significance of specific wording. Royal experts appeared across broadcasts, attempting to interpret what the update might reveal about the king's condition and what it could mean in the months ahead. Some argued that the statement represented transparency and reassurance. Others believed it raised new questions that had yet to be fully answered. The more the announcement was discussed, the clearer it became that public curiosity had evolved into something much deeper. One of the most pressing questions involved the king's future engagements. Observers immediately began wondering whether upcoming commitments would proceed as planned. Would responsibilities continue to be adjusted? Would additional duties be delegated to senior members of the royal family? Could this announcement signal the beginning of a more significant transition behind palace walls? No clear answers emerged, which only intensified public interest. Every possibility seemed to carry enormous implications, not only for Charles himself but also for the institution he represented. As debate intensified, attention increasingly shifted away from short-term developments and toward the broader question of long-term recovery. People were no longer focused solely on immediate updates. They wanted to understand the road ahead. They wanted to know what challenges remained and what progress was still possible. The conversation became larger than a single announcement. It became a reflection of uncertainty itself, a reminder that recovery is rarely predictable, even when hope remains strong. Meanwhile, Messages of support poured in from around the world. Public figures, organizations, and ordinary citizens expressed encouragement and goodwill. The outpouring reflected the unique position Charles occupies on the global stage. Regardless of political views or opinions about the monarchy, many people recognize the personal courage required to continue serving while facing such significant adversity. That shared recognition created a rare moment of collective empathy. Yet beneath the support, analysis, and endless discussion remained a deeper reality. The announcement had marked the beginning of a new chapter. The monarchy now faced a level of uncertainty that could no longer be ignored. Questions lingered, possibilities multiplied. And while the world continued searching for answers, the most important story remained largely hidden from public view, not the story of institutions or headlines, but the story of the man at the center of it all. But beyond the headlines and speculation lies a far more personal story, the story of a monarch determined to continue serving despite extraordinary challenges. For all the titles, ceremonies, and traditions, this is ultimately the story of a man confronting one of life's most difficult battles, while carrying the weight of an ancient institution on his shoulders. Lost beneath the endless analysis, speculation, and debate is a reality that is both simple and deeply human. Behind every palace statement, every carefully managed appearance, and every discussion about the future of the monarchy stands a man facing a challenge that no title can shield him from. King Charles may wear the crown, but his recovery journey has revealed something far more personal than constitutional duty or royal tradition. It has revealed resilience. It has revealed vulnerability. And perhaps most importantly, it has revealed the extraordinary determination required to continue serving while confronting one of the most demanding battles of his life. From the very beginning, Charles appeared determined not to allow his health challenges to define his reign. Even as treatment continued, he remained committed to carrying out responsibilities whenever circumstances allowed. That commitment became one of the defining themes of this chapter. While many people in similar circumstances might have chosen to step away entirely, the king repeatedly sought ways to remain engaged with the work he had spent a lifetime preparing for. To supporters, that dedication reflected a profound sense of duty. To others, it served as a reminder of the immense burden attached to the role he occupies. Either way, it became impossible to ignore the contrast between the demands of leadership and the realities of recovery. What makes recovery so difficult is that it is never solely a physical process. There are emotional challenges that often remain hidden from public view. There are moments of uncertainty, moments of frustration, and moments when progress feels slower than anyone hopes. Yet despite those realities, Charles continued moving forward. Reports consistently described a monarch focused not on what had been lost, but on what still needed to be accomplished. That mindset earned admiration from many observers who saw in his actions a determination that transcended politics, ceremony, or public perception. Throughout this journey, the support of family reportedly remained essential. Behind every public appearance stood a network of individuals, helping him navigate an extraordinarily demanding period. Prince William, Princess Catherine, Queen Camilla, and other senior members of the royal family were not simply carrying out official duties. They were also supporting a husband, father, and grandfather facing profound personal challenges. Their presence served as a reminder that even within one of the world's most famous families, moments of hardship ultimately come down to relationships, loyalty, and support. At the same time, the pressures of leadership never disappeared. The responsibilities associated with the crown continued moving forward regardless of circumstances. Decisions still needed to be made. Duties still needed to be fulfilled. Expectations remained as high as ever. That reality created one of the most compelling aspects of this story. While recovery demanded patience and focus, leadership demanded consistency and presence. Balancing those competing pressures required extraordinary strength. Perhaps that is why the public response became increasingly emotional. The king's struggle stopped feeling like a distant royal story and began feeling deeply personal. People saw not only a monarch but also a man refusing to surrender to adversity. They saw someone attempting to fulfill his responsibilities while navigating uncertainty that no amount of privilege or status could eliminate. In that sense, the recovery battle became larger than the individual details contained in official updates. It became a story about perseverance itself. Yet despite the determination, the support, and the resilience displayed throughout this journey, one reality remained impossible to escape. The road ahead was still uncertain, questions remained unanswered, challenges still lay ahead. And as the king continued confronting his personal battle, those questions naturally began extending beyond the present moment towards something even larger, the future of the institution he had devoted his life to serving. And as the king's personal struggle continues, attention inevitably turns toward the future of the crown itself. Every major royal health update raises the same question: what happens next? It is a question palace officials rarely discuss publicly, yet one that quietly shapes decisions behind the scenes. As concerns surrounding King Charles's recovery continued to dominate conversations across Britain and beyond, attention gradually began shifting toward a subject that many people found difficult to discuss openly. It was not a question of replacing the king or abandoning hope for his recovery. Rather, it was a question that every enduring institution must eventually confront. How does the monarchy continue adapting when uncertainty becomes part of daily reality? The answer lies not in dramatic announcements or sudden changes, but in the careful preparation that has long defined the crown's ability to survive, generation after generation. At the center of those conversations stands Prince William. For years, he has been viewed as the future of the monarchy, but recent events have inevitably brought renewed attention to the role he may be required to play in the years ahead. Every appearance, every engagement, and every responsibility he assumes now carries additional significance. Observers increasingly view him not only as the heir but also as a symbol of continuity during a period marked by uncertainty. While the focus remains firmly on supporting the king, there is no escaping the reality that William's position within the institution has become more important than ever before. Yet what makes this moment particularly fascinating is that the monarchy has faced similar crossroads throughout its history. Different generations have confronted health crises and periods of national uncertainty. Each time, the institution endured because it understood a fundamental principle: the crown must remain larger than any one individual. Kings and queens come and go, circumstances change, challenges emerge without warning. But the institution survives by preparing for every possibility while remaining committed to stability. That philosophy reportedly continues guiding decisions today. Behind palace walls, continuity remains one of the highest priorities. Senior royals have gradually adapted to evolving responsibilities. Workloads have shifted. Expectations have expanded. Planning has become increasingly detailed. None of these adjustments necessarily indicate immediate change. Instead, they reflect the practical reality of ensuring that the monarchy remains capable of fulfilling its responsibilities regardless of circumstances. It is a process designed not to create alarm but to prevent it. Public trust also plays a crucial role in this delicate balance. The strength of the monarchy has always depended heavily on public confidence. People need to believe that the institution remains stable even during difficult periods. That is why every decision, every appearance, and every message carries such importance. Officials understand that uncertainty can create anxiety, while reassurance can strengthen confidence. Maintaining that trust has become one of the defining challenges of this chapter. At the same time, the relationship between tradition and transition grows increasingly significant. The monarchy is built upon centuries of history, yet it must constantly adapt to modern realities. Finding the right balance between preserving tradition and preparing for the future has never been simple. Now, as questions surrounding Charles's recovery continue, that balancing act becomes even more important. The institution must honor the present while quietly preparing for whatever lies ahead. What many observers find reassuring is that despite the challenges, the long-term future of the crown appears secure. The monarchy has weathered countless storms throughout its history. It has survived moments that once seemed unthinkable. While uncertainty may dominate today's headlines, the foundations of the institution remain firmly in place. That reality provides perspective during a period when emotions often threaten to overshadow reason. Still, as significant as these discussions about succession, continuity, and institutional planning may be, they are not what has captured the hearts of millions around the world. Beyond every constitutional question and every strategic calculation lies something far more powerful. It is the emotional connection between a nation and its monarch, a connection revealed most clearly during moments of adversity, when people rally around a leader facing extraordinary challenges. Yet the most powerful part of this story is not about succession, protocol, or planning. It is about the emotional response of a nation watching its king fight on. Tonight, as millions reflect on the palace's devastating update, one feeling unites supporters, critics, and observers alike: uncertainty. The road ahead remains unclear, but the significance of this moment is impossible to ignore. As this extraordinary chapter continues to unfold, The atmosphere surrounding the monarchy feels markedly different than it did only a few months ago. What began as cautious optimism has gradually evolved into a period defined by unanswered questions, heightened concern, and a growing awareness that the challenges facing King Charles are far from over. Across Britain and throughout the world, people continue searching for reassurance, hoping for signs of progress while confronting the reality that recovery journeys rarely follow predictable paths. The latest palace announcement may have provided new information, but it has also reinforced a truth that nobody can escape. Uncertainty remains at the heart of this story. Public concern continues to dominate discussions surrounding the king's condition. Supporters who have followed every update closely remain deeply invested in his recovery, while even casual observers find themselves paying attention to developments that extend far beyond ordinary royal headlines. There is something uniquely powerful about watching a monarch face adversity while continuing to carry the responsibilities of leadership. It transforms a constitutional figure into something more relatable. It reminds people that beneath centuries of tradition and ceremony stands a human being confronting challenges that resonate far beyond palace walls. Throughout all of this, the king's recovery remains the central focus. Every statement, every adjustment, and every public appearance ultimately leads back to the same question: how is Charles doing, and what lies ahead? While experts, commentators, and analysts continue offering their interpretations, the truth is that only time can provide definitive answers. That uncertainty creates tension, but it also creates hope. As long as the journey continues, the possibility of positive developments remains alive. The role of family will undoubtedly remain critical in the weeks and months ahead. Throughout this difficult period, support from those closest to the king has reportedly provided strength during moments of uncertainty. Their presence reflects something larger than royal duty. It reflects loyalty, resilience, and the understanding that some battles can only be faced with the support of those who care most deeply. As new challenges emerge, that support network may prove more important than ever. Meanwhile, the monarchy finds itself standing at another defining moment in its long history. Institutions are often measured not by how they perform during calm periods, but by how they respond when tested. The crown has endured countless challenges throughout generations, adapting and evolving while preserving the continuity that remains central to its identity. Today, that same process continues. The circumstances may be different, but the underlying challenge remains familiar: maintaining stability while navigating uncertainty. Attention from both national and international audiences shows no signs of fading. Every update continues generating discussion, analysis, and reflection. Yet despite the difficult news, hope remains remarkably resilient. Many supporters continue drawing inspiration from the king's determination to fulfill his responsibilities despite extraordinary obstacles. His perseverance has become one of the defining themes of this story, creating a powerful contrast between personal struggle and public service. Still, no one can predict exactly what the coming weeks will bring. Important decisions may lie ahead, new developments may emerge, challenges may intensify, or encouraging progress may shift the narrative once again. That uncertainty is precisely what makes this moment so significant. The story remains unfinished. The next chapter has not yet been written. And for now, the world continues watching, hoping and waiting. Because while the palace has finally confirmed troubling news about King Charles's recovery battle, the next chapter of this story has yet to be written. And the decisions made in the days ahead may shape the future of the monarchy for years to come. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.